prison in a plant body, unfortunately, they have to go through a long progression of evolution of consciousness to get back to the human form, by which they can then make conscious, voluntary decisions to do the right thing. One exception to that is when, by the great fortune of a plant like that, they're growing in a garden tended by devotees, and then that plant is plucked and used as part of the offering to Lord Krishna. In that case, that plant has a immediate jettison, fast lane, express lane journey back to the human form. This is how it was explained to me. Anyway. So it's a very, the metaphysics of that are fascinating. You think about it, you think, okay, I'm taking care of this garden, and it's the biggest bhakta program in the world. We've got all these bhaktas. And my service to them is to see that they are somehow make it to the offering plate of Lord Krishna on the altar. So that's a huge responsibility, and it kind of, excuse me, it paints a whole different picture of the creation. When you look at the nature just of soil, and I brought some with me just with the help of Nampriya, Madhavachandra's wife. I brought these jars from her, I have to bring them back. But this is soil, okay? Now, in that much soil, if it's uncontaminated, and by uncontaminated I mean it has no chemicals in it whatsoever, there are more jivas in there right now as we speak than all the human beings on earth. At last count, Madhavachandra actually counted, there's more than 8 billion human beings on earth. So how is it possible that there's more than 8 billion human beings or living entities, jiva souls, in here? Well, there are. They have some way of figuring this out, but they do know the different body types. There's algae, there's fungi, there's bacteria, there's macro and micro body types, basically 8 billion of them in here. So, since everybody, no matter what kind of body they're in, is part and parcel of Krishna, meant to serve Krishna, one might wonder, what are they doing to serve Krishna? Of course, not consciously, the way we can in the human form. But how do they fit into Krishna's creation? So it's very interesting. The metaphysics of soil give evidence to there has to be an intelligence here at work, how this works. I'll give you an example. If you take a banana, you peel it, and you put the banana peel on the ground, what happens to it within an hour?
It becomes black.
It becomes black. Well, it's oxidizing, right, but what else is happening to it that's causing it to degrade?
Bacteria.
Right, bacteria is attacking it instantly. In other words, the very entities that are in here are eating it, right? So, think about this. When a plant is in the ground, Prabhupada explained to us that when the plant begins dividing, before it begins dividing into the roots of the plant, there's a little area there called the crown. And in that crown is where the jiva soul actually resides. That's why you can cut a tree down and think, we got rid of it, and whoop, it comes back up again. Some weeds will do this also. So why is it, if that banana degrades through bacterial decomposition, that the roots of these plants are not attacked? Why do they? What makes them immune? Anybody want to take a guess?
The roots of the banana?
No, the root of a plant. Let's say an ordinary. In other words, we see that this matter, this banana peel, is being degraded and it's decomposing. And the things that are decomposing it are right here. Why aren't they acting on the roots of live plants?
Because it's jiva. Banana tree doesn't have a jiva.
So they have consciousness.
That's true. That's one way to see it.
The plant has a consciousness, right? So it's using its roots for getting the nutrients out of the soil.
Right.
So that's why
That's
as long as it's life, so that consciousness and soul is there, nobody can deteriorate, because that's the arrangement by Lord Krishna for the plants.
No, that's correct. That's correct understanding. It's very unique how that happens. And this gives proof that there's this intelligence at work. In other words, the same microbiotic activity that would deteriorate an unliving thing, decompose it, can't touch those roots because the plant exudes a chemical antibiotic through its root hairs and its vascular system of roots to impede that. It's like it puts out a protective chemical layer that the microbacteria stay away from. Now, at the same time, their job is to break things down. Now, understand? They're taking sentences and turning them into words, and then other bacteria are taking words and turning them into letters, metaphorically speaking, so that the plant can eat it. So what is this? You have this like simultaneous antagonistic yet harmonious, synergistic relationship going on at the same time. Right, how is that going on? You think, who figured that one out? Not only that, but when you go a level deeper, if there's a particular element missing in the soil that would promote healthy plant growth, or there's a particular overabundance of a particular type of microbe in that soil, the plant can regulate. The plant can regulate the type of chemical formula that it exudes through its vascular system to protect it and to encourage the pulling out of the soil of that needed nutrient. So you have to go, what is going on here? The metaphysics of how all that is working is completely amazing. I mean, who would think that there's not some intelligence at work? You know, there's obviously the plant has some consciousness. It's there. It's very rudimentary, but it's there. Actually, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, plants have a type of consciousness that's even more developed than fish. I read that like 10 times in Bhagavatam, over and over. Fish can seem to express mobility and decision-making about so many things. But actually, according to Bhagavatam, the consciousness of the plant is actually more fully developed than a fish. So there's some intelligence at work there to make, to be able to adjust to different situations. Yes?
Is this, the analogy is also to living beings like us, right? Because we die, the body deteriorates. As long as we are alive, the same bacteria exist in us, right? And we keep it, we keep them at bay, right?
Because we're the predominating deity, so to speak,
Right. So there is this.
of our own body.
So it's analogous.
Yeah. And when that gets out of check, time factor, bad living habits, poor diet, they get out of control. It's called disease. So what we're establishing here is that there's this whole amazing world in the soil by which a plant is nourished, by which that plant can grow something that can be offered to Krishna. Of course, Krishna says that's all he'll accept: leaf, water, fruit, butter. So that is kind of a nice thing to try to understand this, in a sense, to understand how has Krishna arranged this by which he'll accept an offering? How is that working? Right? So along comes farming that is not based upon plain living, high thinking, as I don't know if you heard me last night, but we were discussing the value of living in a very simple yet austere village-like environment. Madhavachandra and Nampriya were describing their youth to me, in Tamil Nadu, how, to the age of 14, they didn't have electricity. And And I was asking him all these detailed questions about how did they make oil? Gandhi, or how does it say? What's it?
Gunning.
Gunning.
This is very like.
Yeah, how did you do this? How did you get your water? How did you dig the well?
Yeah.
How did you? And it was difficult, there was a lot of tapasya there, but there was community. There was a very rich, deep sense of community. We're in this together. And the point is that interdependency is not a weakness. Interdependent relationships, mutually reinforcing relationships, is a symptom of Brahminical culture. Because in Brahminical culture, we understand that I'm not the doer, that I depend upon, ultimately, the Supreme Lord, who through his ways that the material nature works, provides for my maintenance. And then there's other entities in there, the cow, the bull, other human beings, who I really depend upon. So Brahman, being a Brahman, means I'm not worried for my maintenance. I don't have to stash things. I don't have to hoard things. I don't have to be flustered and worried and my consciousness all being drawn away by material things. Because I have faith, there's Shraddha there, that Krishna will provide for me. He'll give me exactly what I need. And of course this is confirmed throughout Shastra. In Sri Upanishad, which when I was just finding out about Krishna consciousness, that's the first book I saw. And I had no religious background whatsoever, none. And I read that book, and I read the invocation, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachite Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Vishishite. And the first sloka, Isha Vaishamidam Sarvam Yatkincha Jigatim Jigat Tena Tyaktina Pujita Magadha Kashasvidana. And I realized my life had changed. That's the potency of Srila Prabhupada's books. That he explained to me something that nothing in Western science, nothing in my public education could possibly offer me. It was a clear, cogent understanding of how I fit into this creation. Because if you think of that verse, the first verse, what does it say? It's the foundation rock for environmentalism. It's the foundation for sane ecological policy. Everything animate and inanimate, everything moving around is owned and controlled by the Lord. Therefore, one should accept only those things which are set aside as one's quota, and not take other things, knowing well, Hare Krishna, thank you for coming, knowing well to whom they belong. So that is the beginning of a clear understanding of how to interact with your environment. That actually all of these things that I'm interacting with are not actually mine. They're only controlled, not only owned by, but controlled by the Lord. Therefore, I should only take what I need, not taking other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So, of course, this begs the question now. Well, who says what I need? Who makes that decision? Right? Who's going to say, you only need this much, don't take anything else, right? Who's the authority to make these decisions, right? Well, of course, again, we take shelter of, again, the words of Lord Krishna, the words of the Mahajans, the words of Sadhu, Guru, Shastra, and their examples, their living examples. So a Brahmin by nature is somebody who is samadhamastapau shaucham, shantam arjunam evacha, jnanam astikam, vamakarma swabhavajam. They're peaceful about and reflective of the higher values of life. They intentionally don't want to get entangled in over-collecting or even over-endeavoring, because they know that this is beyond what Krishna wants. So that quota for each person is clearly enunciated through Shastra. So let's go back to this. So, okay, we're establishing the foundation by which we believe what we believe, right? Why do we believe what we believe? Right? All right, so now we've got all these living entities in here. And we've identified that their seva, so to speak, even though it may be unconscious to them, nevertheless, the way that they cooperate with the Ishvara is to break things down so that these plants can use them and create a brinjal or a cauliflower or whatever. Along comes someone who doesn't accept Isha Vaishnavidam Sarvam, that Krishna is controlling everything, and they put this on. You know what this is?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. Pelletized fertilizer. Where does it come from? How do you make this? It doesn't grow on trees.
Is it natural fertilizer? Or?
No, it's chemical.
Chemical.
Yeah, it's like Miracle Grow and all that nonsense. But where does this come from? How do they make this?
Same command. Same.
Chemical reaction.
Synthetic.
But animals.
It's synthetic. It's just they
Synthetic, right?
they just want to make it.
What's
from-
the basis of, what's the
Earth.
No, it's
It
petrol.
they will take
Petrol.
it from animals.
petrol?
Petrol.
Petroleum. It's made actually from natural gas. No, don't ask me how. It's a high-tech, obviously a very high-tech procedure. And the way that this came about to be used extensively in agriculture is that it's also ammonium nitrate, ammonium phosphate, like that. It's the very ingredient that during these wars that they used to make gunpowder, ammunition. Here it is, right here. So here they're fighting these big wars, World War I, World War II, right? Basically all resource wars, just like they are now. They claim it's to stop the spread of this ideology or that ideology. It's a resource war. Let's get real. And then the war ends, finally, they get tired of beating each other up, right? And they've got millions and billions of pounds of this left over. 1943, 1944. So those economic and political forces that created this, and also, by the way, created those wars, right? How do you dump this onto the market and commercialize it? Well, what they found, of course, and these were experiments done 100 years before that in Germany, was that when you add this to this, you get this enhanced plant growth that accelerates plant growth quickly. Very quickly and very predictably, what the effect of this on this. So, all of a sudden, and I actually witnessed this as a child. I was raised on a farm in Michigan. All of a sudden, farming went from this small-scale economy of scaled-down economy, to this massive production, the so-called Green Revolution. And it was because of this. Now, what happens actually when you add this to this is it basically kills all the jivas. And the reason for that is that when this comes in contact with water, it's water soluble. So when it comes in contact with water, that fluid hitting the bodies of those jivas kills them. It's like me taking a bucket of battery acid, pouring it over my head, it would kill me. So that's what it's like for them. And when you do that repeatedly, every growing cycle, spring, fall crop, maybe 2 crops, maybe 3 crops a year, next year, same thing. After a while, you have no living entities in the soil, practically speaking. They can't survive it. And then when you add to that the other neurotoxic chemicals like pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, like that, the combination of all that together makes a neutered soil. So it actually, all it really is doing at this point, after years of this, it's an anchor. That's all. It's just holding the plant in place while you give it a chemical enema And you basically declared chemical warfare on nature by doing this. So, people sometimes ask, because I'm a farmer, and I have to deal with insects and all that, and they say, well, what do you do? You have these big ideas. How do you deal with insects? What's your strategy? Well, there's two things. One, you do have to do some preventative care of the plants. There are organic compounds, like neem, for example, or pyrethium is another one. That you can,
Gobar,
Comp-
yeah, cow dung.
Gober also, sure. Urine, cow urine.
Then you put it on.
Right. That you can use, they're helpful. Difficult though, where it's raining a lot, because you put them on and it rains, put them on and it rains. And so it's time, takes a lot of time, and sometimes it can be costly. But here's the real way this works. When a plant is growing in healthy soil, healthy meaning the microbiotic life in that soil teeming with life, and there's air, and there's all the ingredients needed for them to reproduce. Keep in mind, these guys don't live very long. Maybe a day, I don't know, probably depending on the body type. It's not a very long lifespan, but their bodies then create fertilizer, and their excrement also creates fertilizer for these plants. So there's this constant rotating and hopefully increasing population. So these are the real farmers. There they are, and they're not me. These are the real farmers. They're the ones who are doing the work. And all I'm doing is I'm just serving them by putting gober, compost, make sure there's aeration and drainage, there's soil structure, there's a cycling of these nutrients going. That's really all. I'm just a facilitator for the guys who are really doing the work. So when you do this to them, what have you done? You basically committed bhumi aparat. Because that is Krishna's arrangement. That's how Krishna wants this done, not this. Right? When a plant is growing in that healthy soil, here's what happens. The plant, by the grace of Krishna, develops what are called phenols, polyphenols. It's a compound. And flavonoids. And they infuse the tissue of the plant with phenols and flavonoids. On the leaf surfaces and the stems and the vascular tissue of that plant has phenols and flavonoids. So when an insect comes by to do harm and he bites that plant, he doesn't like the taste of it because of the presence of those phenols and flavonoids, if they're in sufficient quantity, because the soil is rich, because the microorganisms are happy and healthy. So it's the immune system, if you will, of the plant. That's how it works. Just like if we're eating bad diet, and we have bad habits, irregular habits, and we're around sickly people, we get sick. Conversely, if we're regulated in our behavior, careful about what we eat and all that, you have a strong enough immune system that you're not affected. More difficult to fall sick. So just like that, plants have their own, by Krishna's arrangement, their own immune system based upon healthy soil. So when we come along, when man comes along and he commits bhumi aparad like that, he's set into motion maya sugaya. Okay, now that you've done that, now you've got a field that is growing 1,000 acres of broccoli because of these. It all looks healthy, it all looks like you see in the stores here, Safeway, or right, and it all looks so abundant, healthy and cosmetically perfect and all that. Well, it's because it's been doused with this, and because the triggering mechanism that triggers the production of phenols and flavonoids is not there. It doesn't need to be. It's not triggered genetically. Because of this, the plant is now susceptible to aphids and all kinds of insect invasions because they like the taste of it. So how do we combat that? We bring in an airplane. See these photographs? It's like It's declaring war on nature, basically, just kill everything. And the drift from that is going everywhere. And the people who work there, mostly Latino, are affected by it. They're dying of cancer. So that's the reality of the situation. Now let's fast forward that. Here we are, we're sitting in this wonderful temple, beautiful days, yes.
Well, like, if we put that one in the soil, the soil gets spoiled. So how long that soil can sustain? Like, what they do after some time, basically.
Well, if you leave it alone, Umi Devi, she's very forgiving. So if you leave that soil alone for years, like 3-4 years like that, it'll eventually oxidize. These poisons will eventually either dissipate, be neutralized, oxidize, something. But it'll change. She's very forgiving, very, very tolerant.
Sometimes also depends on the strength of the chemicals. Sometimes it might stay for longer.
Right.
Sometimes it might.
So
I mean, just to give you an example. In this temple, just like New Vrindavan, a big part of the diet is olive oil, potato. I do a workshop entitled Welcome to Mama Frankenstein's Kitchen. And in this workshop, when I go to a college to do this workshop, they always say, "Where's your PowerPoint?" I don't have one. What I do is I bring a potato, a brinjal, and a tomato. Done. That's all I bring. And I just set them in front of me, and the students are kind of, who is this crazy man? What's he going to talk about with a potato? What I do is I walk them through the story of the life cycle of a potato, a commercial potato. And this is what it is. When you plant potatoes, you plant the seed of the potato. Now, that doesn't mean a small seed. Has anyone here ever planted potatoes? You know how to do this?
Usually you put a small potatoes.
Small
Right.
potato and then you.
Right. You take a portion of last year's potatoes that are good quality. You cut them. You cut maybe a big potato like this into 4 or 5 pieces, and you look for 2 eyes,
Yeah.
right? 2 potential sprouting areas on that surface, right? Then you dig a trench, and every foot you put this potato in, right, for acres. Right? And it's a pretty simple plant. It's not too complex. You bring the soil over, and as it grows, you bring more soil over, fill it up like that, right? Well, in the commercial potato world, the first thing they do is they go over the field with a fungicide, which is extremely toxic. It kills everything on that surface of that soil. Then they take that seed potato and they soak it in a systemic poison that's so toxic that when the potato actually starts to grow after it's planted and it bursts through and it begins to form foliage on it like this, if a hapless potato bug happens to bite it, he's dead. That's how toxic the plant is. And the nature of that toxin is that it's systemic. You know what this word means? Systemic? It means that every cell in that plant is toxic. This is why GMOs are so dangerous, because every bit of that corn or soya or now wheat, zucchini, on and on and on, is toxic. It's not just the well, just get a brush and I'll wash the outside of it off. No, it's systemic poison. So, all right, so now the potato's grown, it's there, and weeds are coming. What do you do about weeds? Well, we're growing 1,000 acres of potatoes. We can't go hand pick them or hoe them like this. We bring herbicides in. So this is this big tank filled with very potent neurotoxic chemical. And it's got these arms that come out from the big tank with these spray units on it. Mist sprayer, and they spray the whole thing. And then, of course, bugs are attacking again, because that systemic has worn off to some degree, or it's not effective. This particular type of Colorado potato bug, they call it. So they come through with pesticides, and pesticides, and pesticides, and more herbicides. So finally, after, depending on weather conditions, this plant has been blasted and blasted and blasted. And I forgot to mention it's chemical fertilizer they use in the trench. Then it comes time to harvest. harvest time for a potato means when it's forming flowers in the top, it's also setting potatoes on the bottom. A good return is 7 to 1. For every seed potato you put in, you get 7 potatoes. That is better than you can do on Wall Street, right?
7 times it.
What an investment. I was mentioning this last night about Benjamin Franklin. He said that's the real wealth of a nation, is to plant a seed. And from one seed, you get so many seeds. So now this potato is formed, the plant has formed its potatoes, time to harvest. And they come through, you would think, well, just let the plant die back, and we'll come through with our harvesting equipment. The harvesting equipment gets underneath the potatoes, like this, and there's this conveyor, like this, and it picks them up, and it sets them up on this conveyor, so you can pick them off and throw them into this big gravity-fed wagon, right? Well, they don't wait for the potato plant to die. They come through again with something like Agent Orange, the equivalent of Agent Orange, what it's called. And they blast the field so that the foliage just shrivels up from toxicity and just dies. Because it doesn't, by doing that, they can get in the field earlier because they get a better market price for those potatoes. And it doesn't tangle up their equipment with vegetation, right? The top of the plant. So you think, okay, enough is enough. I did it, and I got the potatoes. No, there's one more step. And that is, now they take these potatoes, and before they actually market them and bag them or market, they dunk them in a fungicide so the eyes won't grow. So there can be no life whatsoever. And I know this for a fact because not only can you read about these things, but one of my garden projects in the city of Wheeling is at a child care center called the King's Daughters Child Care. It's a Christian organization. And years ago, I put in a garden for them, and then I show up once a week and I work with the kids. It's about 20, 30 children, preschoolers, 3-year-olds. And so, when you're working with preschoolers, you have to do things that they can really do. Like you can't give them lettuce seed or mustard seeds. They can't, it's too much dexterity. They drop them, whatever. So I give them, one thing we plant is potatoes. So I had the kids plant potatoes. And then I went back about 3 weeks later. I was noticing that I didn't see any potatoes. So about 3 weeks later, I went back and what is going on here? These were not potato seed from organic potatoes. These are just potatoes I bought in the store. It was an emergency. I didn't have any potatoes. And they were red. They're called Pontiac tomatoes. Red Pontiac tomatoes, right? Or potatoes. So I cut them up and the kids put them in there. I go back in 3 weeks, curious now, why isn't anything popping up? And I dig in there and I pull up these potatoes. And they have not changed at all in 3 weeks. Nothing has happened. There's no sprouts. The color is as red as the day we put it in. All they've done is scabbed over a little on the bottom, period. So then I had to think, what did they do to this potato by which it won't even sprout and it won't even grow? Now see, so it's either irradiated, I don't know, I'd have to call it.
What is the use? What benefit they will get?
The benefit is long shelf life.
Long shelf life.
Yeah, because you can put it under your sink in a bag and it'll be there a year later. It'll still be there. It won't sprout. In other words, the life of that potato is compromised.
Only one question.
Yes.
Like America basically is one of the topmost country in the world, and their people are here very intelligent, related to science and everything basically.
Mhm.
So in spite of all this knowledge they have, so why they do this such thing basically? Even they here they talk about hygiene, wash your hand, do this, do that. The bacteria should not be there. Like there is a lot of food inspectors comes to the temple,
Right.
right? The bacteria will go, even temperature is instead of 40, 41. They talk so much about those things. On the other hand, the story you are telling here is something different. Like it's come from some different country,
Yeah.
and it's happening here.
Right.
So why there is so much difference?
Double standards.
No, no, no.
No, it's a good question. The difference obviously is that the profits that they're making, the corporate profits that they're making by controlling the food supply in this way and predictably being able to do things like that are making them wealthy. That's the reason.
Making them.
Making them wealthy.
When
Wealthy. In other words, everybody in this room is dependent on somebody else feeding them,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Except me. I grow my own. Not that I'm so a big man, but I figured this out years ago. That's before I was a devotee even, I figured this out. And when somebody else is growing your food, I don't mean to be crude here, but you're a kept animal. That means,
Yeah, that's right, Prabhu.
that means somebody else, I gotta go out and get money. Why do I need money? I gotta buy food, and food's expensive. Go to Whole Foods and look. So you go to Whole Foods and you think, oh, I'm buying organic. Well, the other name for Whole Foods is whole paycheck. Right? Because it's ridiculously expensive, right? You have
Yeah, Prabhu. See, I've seen this situation here basically. The food thing you're telling is, we are so much dependent on food here, basically on the food chain and whatever is there. I was in Bellevue like 3 years back, there was snow and there was no power for 6 days.
Wow.
People were crying literally. Like I seen one lady and she was crying like anything. Like I was a stranger that time, stranger for her basically, and she was asking me where I can get coffee. For her, the coffee is in some store.
Yeah, there's
That
all
she
that-
don't know how to do those things.
Right, exactly.
If the power is not here, everything collapsed here basically. Everything. I went to the store and I bought some things and I was reached the counter to pay the money and the power went off because they were running on the generator and generator shut down
Right.
because there was no gas in the generator.
Right.
And I was on the counter and she was doing the punching and it stopped immediately and she didn't give me the food at all. I told her like, okay, I will count myself. If it is $10, I will pay you $20. Give me the food, bread and all those things.
Right.
She said she can't do it.
Right.
Food is there, everything is there. They cannot give it.
Yeah, yes, it's
They're
symptomatic
not
of
supposed
the
to
same.
sell without going through the.
Yeah.
Right, it's symptomatic of the same
Yeah.
thing. So the point is, go ahead.
Yeah, also when the Prabhuji's original question, it's kind of cruelty. I somehow figured out how cruel they are to mother cow, how they extract milk. I think I'm seeing the same kind of cruelty to vegetables and the plant life as well.
Same mindset.
It's the same thing, they exploit, like they want to get maximum, whether it's they're milking the cow or they're taking out the meat or they're exploiting a
Abhitram
animal.
cha, nivritim cha, janana vidar asurya, nasacham napichacharo, nasatyam tesham vidite. This is how Krishna explains what you're describing. Those who are demoniac do not know what's to be done, what's not to be done. Neither cleanliness, nor truthfulness, nor proper behavior is found in them. Next verse. Asatyam apatistam te jagadapura nishranam. Can't remember the last two. Aparaspara sambuti kimanyakam. I think. Anyway, basically, don't pull that technology. Don't you dare. We're trying to wean him off of total dependence on technology. Very difficult. Because think about it. You know, when we see, when you get this wonderful class today, we're looking at the imagery, wonderful painting that devotees did years ago of Parikshit Maharaj sitting at the feet of Shukadeva Goswami, right?
I didn't see that.
There's no laptops, nobody's looking at their iPhone, right? So, as explained by Srila Prabhupada in Nectar of Devotion, when a pure devotee is speaking, because of the purity of their intent to glorify Krishna, they're able to convey onto the screen of the heart and in the mind of a person the very imagery that we've become so dependent on through this digital technology. because there's two things going on, the purity of the speaker and the purity of the listener, the submissive, listening nicely, like that. So that all the same thing is there. And this is what mystifies the social historians and the anthropologists about India. They can't figure this out. You know, read Sir Robert Clive, the first so-called governor of India, right? Read what he said and what his underlings under him said this is the 1760s in India, when East India Trading Company first came, right? Here's what they said. We have traveled the length and the width of this country, and we don't understand what's going on here, because it appears that everybody's happy. There's no thievery. I mean, there's always a little bit, something there, some gundas there, doing something. There's no thievery, people are satisfied. There's areas we see where there appears to be more cows than people, and it seems to us that the whole economy is based on cows. That's what they observe. So here they're trying to figure out, how are we going to exploit these people? How are we going to extract their natural resources and colonize them so they work for us? Right? And what they realized was, because of the spiritual strength of the people, Indian people having such a deep background in Shastra, understanding what is Guru, what is Sangha, what is Shastra, like that they had to break their backs morally. And they did that by opening slaughterhouses. First slaughterhouse was, within a few years, 100 slaughterhouses had opened up. This has crushed people's morale to see the cows being slaughtered like this. So like that, to answer your question, that's the mentality. So, asatyama pratisthite. Following such conclusions, the demoniac who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence engage in unbeneficial, horrible work meant to destroy the world. They say this world is unreal, that there is no God in control, that it has no cause other than lust. Following such conclusions, the demoniac who are lost to themselves engage in these unbeneficial, horrible works. And then Krishna identifies even the mentality of the demons. He says, so much is mine today. I will gain more according to my schemes. I have so much now, and more will come. He is my enemy, and I have killed him. And my other enemy will also be killed. I am the richest man. I'm surrounded by aristocratic relatives. I will perform some charity. I'll give some charity. I will perform some yajna, and I'll rejoice. In other words, they don't identify Krishna as the enjoyer, as the Bhoktanam Yajna Tapa Sam. They think they're the enjoyer, and they'll just give Krishna a little bit. Here, stay away from me now. I'm giving you some yajna. Right. Read Krishna book. Yes.
So one of the points, Prabhu, you were talking about, you said that the Prabhupada said in one of the Germany class, it's 100 times better that devotee grows and offer to Krishna. So a few of the morning lectures of Prabhupada said many times that you should have your own land and you should grow your own food. Even when we are engineers, or mostly, we have money or we have skills, so we are doing it. But we don't feel that dependency. But when I connect this, okay, why Prabhupada is saying we should have our own land, we should grow our own food. Why we should do when we don't have time, to do job and other services and going. Then the factor comes how the food is grown, with what mentality, what they use it, and we're thinking those are good and supply, and we're dependent on them, and then we use it for offering or other things. So understanding of Prabhupada, that point, why it's so necessary to grow our own food is not only for us, it's for Krishna.
That's for Krishna's pleasure. So those who are demoniac, they recognize that there's something they can't control. So they want to give some little charity and give some yajna. So read Krishna book. What is his name? Kamsa, Shalva, Jarasandha, they all perform yajnas. wasn't like they were, in fact, they were very good at it. They engaged the Brahmins, but their mentality was enviousness of Krishna. Ultimately, it wasn't for the right purpose. It wasn't really wasn't for Krishna's satisfaction. It was to secure and enhance their own wealth. And that's very different. So now we come to, yes?
Krishna Prabhu, I actually grew up in a farm. Still I have the farm in my village. My father's still a farmer.
Wow.
So when I used to grow up until my 20 years, I did the bullock cart and everything and milking the cows. We didn't use much fertilizer. I see now changing is the struggle for the farmers, like the price has gone down, cost of, so it looks like there's no option for them to use this self-sustaining, and it's kind of there in diagram, at least I can see a lot of farmers are bankrupt. So there's no option to take a shelter of all this pesticide and fertilizer. So it's difficult to understand now. I mean, we didn't use that many fertilizers, but at least we use, like when we grew up, michi or any of those things we used to do, chili. But what I am trying to understand, I guess, is there is a capitalism and this sustainability. So it's like there's a clash. How do
Well, there is, you're right, but there shouldn't be.
okay.
It doesn't have to be. Sustainable farming is not only environmentally sustainable, you're not poisoning the earth, but it's socially sustainable and economically sustainable, and most importantly, spiritually sustainable. All those things have to be in place. So the market forces that made your father or yourself subject to exploitation for the price of your mate or the peppers were out of control. And therefore it puts you under this pressure that, oh, now we've got to compete. The reality is the coordinating principle of the universe is not competition, it's cooperation. And when that's lost due to lack of Krishna consciousness, then we find ourselves in these compromised positions. Now the fact is, I can't remember the number exactly, but over 100,000 farmers, especially in Andhra Pradesh and elsewhere, have committed suicide because of Monsanto coming in, selling them all these things that they can't, they take a loan out, they can't afford it, they realize they'll never get out of debt. And what's the value of life? And I'll be a debtor my whole life. So, let's fast forward to the deities now, right? So that's the life of a potato.
And tomato.
And a tomato, they're the worst. The worst place you could possibly grow a tomato in the whole continental United States is Florida. There's no worse place because of the humidity and the constant attacking of this plant by bugs. Have you ever lived in Florida or see? When you live in Florida, you're always going like this, trying to keep the bugs out of your eyes. It's like a horrible place. You know? It's like a windshield wiper in front of your face all the time. Because then you're sweating and the gnats are coming all over your eyes. It's like terrible. So they grow tomatoes in this place, and the only way they can grow them successfully is to blast them and blast them and blast them. Then you eat that. So what happens when you eat that? Anybody know? What part of your body, by Krishna's arrangement, what in our anatomy, our internal organs, is supposed to filter out poison?
Kidney,
Kidney and liver.
liver.
Also skin, some degree. Skin's actually the biggest eliminative organ. That's why bathing is so important. But the kidney and liver, that's their function, basically. When you eat something grown in soils that have been blasted for years, just a reservoir of these toxins, and then on top, herbicide, pesticide, fungicide, like that, repeatedly. Okay, so now you eat this brinjal, or this broccoli plant, or whatever. Where do those synthetic chemicals go in your body? Your kidney and your liver may get rid of some of them if they're very, very healthy only. But normally that doesn't happen. Normally they're stored. Where do they get stored?
In gallbladder?
No.
In
By Krishna's grace.
blood?
No. No. Fat.
Fat. Oh.
In other words, the least metabolically active part of your body, by the grace of the Lord, is where He puts it. Okay. Here, let's park it over here. Right? And then, especially if you're trying to control your weight, your body's immune system, because it's this foreign agent, builds a cell wall around it, of fat tissue, to encapsulate it, so that it can't leach into your bloodstream and poison you. So I was giving a class to a bunch of college students at West Virginia University. These are agricultural students. They're studying to be future farmers. And I started the class by saying to them, before we talk about farming and why organic and all that, how many of you in this class, there's probably 40 or 50 people in this small auditorium, how many of you in here have one or two relatives close to you who died of cancer? Everybody in the room raised their hand, myself included. My mother, stomach cancer, my father, lung cancer, my brother, bone cancer or something, right? Everybody raised their hands. So I said, okay, leave your hands up. Now spin around and look. Do we have a problem here? Now, okay, put your hands down. Let me ask a second question. How many of the women in the room plan to have children someday? Pretty much everybody raised their hand. And most of these classes are predominantly women. So then I asked the very thing we're talking about now. I said, what happens when you eat things that are chemically toxic? Where does it go? No idea. You could go to the medical college and ask that. Nobody knows. They really don't know. They don't study nutrition. They don't study these things. So I explained to them that because your body is pocketed with these little time bombs now, encapsulated poison, when you go to have that child, remember you said you wanted to have a child, right? Well, when you go to have that child, where do you think the child is eating from? Where is it? You're not feeding him with a spoon. How's the in the amniotic fluid within the womb? Of course, we know the child's through the belly button, the placenta. What's the placenta attached to on the other end? Now, it's not a tube where you're putting Chuck E. Cheese pizza in it, and right? Where's it attached to? The fat tissue. So I said to them, this was the kicker line. I said, your future child's predisposition to cancer, remember all the relatives that you have who died of cancer, and autism, and Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's, and all these neurotoxic diseases that are ravaging human society now, is in your body now. Right now. Not 10 years from now when you get married. Now. You're carrying the genetic endowment of your future child. Right now.
Time bombs.
It's like a time bomb. That's what's happening. So, yes?
But Prabhu, over here, ladies and all these guys, they eat so many bad things, but they're very always slim. I don't know what they do, but sometimes they are slim, right? So they do exercises and all that.
Yeah, that's kind of another issue, diet.
But fat tissues are like visibly fat tissues, or even if you are slim, then also they can.
Yeah, no, even if you're slim.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's what I wanted to
Everybody
ask.
has fat.
So, yeah, everybody's got, women actually have an extra layer of fat to nurse, give milk, and like that, to give them that ability.
Now we are also part of that same team.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
It's not that we are
You're not
different.
so right now as we speak, right here, right now today, here in Seattle, Washington, the cancer rate in America is 48% for men. That means, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half of us are going to die of cancer right now. I mean, not right now, but
Eventually.
sooner or later. It's number 2 killer. Number 1 killer is heart disease, right? Because of the way people are eating.
So number 1 is cancer, second is heart.
Number 2.
Heart-
Number 2
heart
is
attack?
cancer. Heart attack, yeah. Heart attack.
Heart disease and cancer.
Right. Okay, so let's take this to the next level. So we're here in this temple with the wonderful deities, and learning how to serve Krishna nicely. why would we give Krishna, in other words, now that I've scared everybody about what we're eating, right? Why would you offer Krishna something that you consciously know is toxic, like a potato or a tomato from those sources, or brinjal? In the lifespan of a brinjal, they grow them, those seeds they plant, they get about this high, and all these Latino people go out and they put them in plastic, acres of them, right? In the production cycle of a brinjal, they're sprayed 17 times, 17 toxic spraying events before they actually harvest it and market it. So here we are, we're, some yajna, some marriage is going on, a daily offering to the deities, whatever. At my own children, I'm conscious of these things. I'm not going to give them these things. I'm going to shop organic and try to find some healthy sources. But the deities, we just give them, they're like the clearinghouse for all these things. Krishna cannot be contaminated, so we just throw it at him. What is the mentality here? What are we thinking? I won't give it to my child because I'm worried about their future health consequences, but I'll give it to Krishna? You see? So I'm not trying to find blame or shame here. That's not the point. But the point is we have to start thinking like this. If we start thinking like this, we'll start forming our own farm, at least until we find our own farm and develop it. We'll at least find sources that are pure and uncontaminated, so that we feel good about what we're offering to Krishna. We don't feel like we're, here Krishna, have some, have the neurotoxins that we're afraid to eat, but we're going to give them to you because we want to make some nice sabji for Radhastami or whatever. So that has to change. That mentality has to change and be corrected. So that what drives our farming is driven by desire to give Krishna the purest thing. And of course the purest thing is we grow it ourselves. It's coming from the hands of devotees, not from people who also raise chickens and slaughter them. They have beef cows over here, and they have a CSA, a vegetable garden over here, and we buy some vegetables. Okay, that's better if they're organic, but it's still not the real thing. Yes, question?
Two questions I have. One question is we want to pot, we want to put a soil. I went out and bought a bag of a soil. So it costed $7, this one big bag.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, they put so much of chemicals in the fields and everywhere. So, like, is it so cheap, the chemicals, so they can afford it?
It's subsidized.
So subsidized?
It's cheap because it's subsidized. In other words, when you go into Costco or wherever you shop, and you see a bag of corn chips, $1.50 for this huge bag, cheap, all this carbohydrate, right? Why is it so cheap? Or let's say you buy this time of year broccoli, and it's $1.50, maybe $2 at the most. 3 big spears of broccoli with a rubber band, cellophane over it. It's not $1.50. Let's say $2. It's not $2. The actual cost of that broccoli is $5. Who pays the other 3? In other words, when you're at the cash register and you're holding your broccoli and you check out or give your card, you swipe your card, you pay $2 here.
So cool.
But out of your back pocket, unknown to you, the federal government took $3 in taxes to make that $2 purchase possible. What's it paying for? Paying for the chemical fertilizers. It's paying for the pesticides, the herbicides, the fungicides. It's paying for the diesel fuel. It's paying for the welfare and the calamity of the lives of the people, those Latino people who are picking it, and by the way, being poisoned, dying of cancer, it's paying their medical bills. It's paying for price support. Even if, they're guaranteed, you're going to get, when you were growing up, did you have price? Well, actually in India they do, to some degree. There's some price support there. The government will subsidize some things. It pays price support. It pays crop insurance. If the whole field of broccoli, because they put too much poison on it, and dies, the wrong poison, they get paid anyway. It's like insurance, right? Then you've got to truck it all the way up here from where it's grown in California, maybe some grows here, I don't know, or all the way to West Virginia where I am. Who's paying for that interstate? You are. Taxpayers paying for that whole thing. Then, because they've grown it with such chemical toxicity, the water shed and the water table are now poisoned. Who pays for that cleanup? You do. So that's where the other $3 is paying for, so that they can sell that for $2. This is most dramatically understood in meat. The actual cost of a pound of meat, if it was not subsidized by the government for cheap grain, cheap soya, cheap corn, price support, crop insurance and all that, is not $7 a pound like it is now. It's $35 a pound. So if you go to buy a typical hamburger, please don't, but if somebody does this, and it costs $2. No, it's not $2, it's actually $7. The real cost of that. Who's paying the other $5? We are. Because of that subsidy that's there. So it looks like food is cheap in these stores right now because they're growing all this corn, growing all these soybeans genetically now, genetically modified. That's a whole other discussion.
But in comment, like in my area, at least in the Andhra Pradesh where I grew from, so the politicians, they basically artificially reduce the prices on things so that they can get the more support from the all class of people.
Right.
That puts a burden on the farmers.
Right.
They cannot sell because they artificially reduce the prices. They have to grow more.
Right.
So now that's I see this
See
going
the
for
pattern.
last 20 years. It's going
Right. And now this leads us into a whole amazing discussion about food independence in Brahminical culture. The reality is this: you cannot successfully be part of a Brahminical culture if you're not food independent. How can you be food independent when you've got these politicians, these other people manipulating these prices so that the farmer, whether it's in Andhra or in Iowa, they're growing fence line to fence line. There's no borders. It's just corn everywhere. And then they take this corn, which they overproduce. They have more of it than they can actually possibly use. And they destroy the markets of people everywhere around the world with this cheap corn. Corn comes from Mexico originally, South America. So America now exports corn to those places because they've destroyed the economy, the village economy, the subsistence economy of the farmers, and that whole culture of plain living, high thinking that was there is gone. So now these people have to all go into Mexico City or Mumbai or New York City and find some kind of a job in a competing job market. Why did the British build all those railroads? It wasn't because they worried about Indian people walking too much. It was because they wanted to herd them all into Calcutta, Delhi, and Mumbai to exploit them. That was their mentality. Yes.
Prabhu, in here also I saw some documentaries some time back. There were some good farmers here. They don't want to go in the genetic modifying growth of the plants. But here the different competitors, the corporates, some way or other, they will put them down, and either they will give the option. Either you want to go join us, like do the all modified genetic production, or go away from here. If they will try to fight, I saw documentaries. Some of the farmers, they try to fight with the lawyers and everything, but eventually they don't have that much money to fight with the. Eventually they will go down. And the documentary was about that only. There are awareness, but people cannot sustain by the fighting other corporates.
Right.
And they keep going down. If we are planning to do this, will we end up with this situation in one day, or
No,
we don't know?
No, because there's a growing movement worldwide. I mean, I wish I could say the biggest conversation in the whole world is Krishna Katha. Everybody's talking about Krishna. Not true. I wish it was that way. But one good sign is that the biggest katha in the world is sustainability. This is the issue everybody is talking about, energy use and sustainability. in conjunction with what you just said, there's also wonderful things happening in India. Either write this down or remember it. Timbuktu Collective. This is, I think it's happened in Andhra Pradesh. But basically, a 1978 visionary who had some background in farming and chemistry or something, took a piece of land in Andhra that was devastated. It was just eroded and unfertile and everything, and has now developed it into this amazing organic operation that is employing people from all over the region. They're producing organic produce and value-added products beyond just the produce. Very successful. So, how do we understand Brahminical culture in relation to food independence? Well, if you can't grow your own food, how can you speak the truth? That's what a Brahmin is supposed to do, not compromise the truth. How can you speak the truth when you're dependent on somebody else feeding you? Not the actual real deal. In American academia, for example, if you're a professor for many years, they call it, you finally get what's called tenure. You know what this tenure is? The real purpose of that tenure is that they can't fire you anymore. So now you're free to speak the truth. Of course, it doesn't work that way. Because of political connections and all these things, they don't speak the truth. They're just part of the old boys club. They just go along with everything the way it is. But it's a reflection, pervertedly, of course, of the real Brahminical culture, where the Brahmanas, as we read from Bhagavatam, or maybe you have direct experience, they're maintained nicely. They actually don't want very much because there's they recognize the trap of over-collecting. But they're maintained nicely so that they're free not to be pestered by maintenance of the body, to speak the truth. So food is the beginning of that. When Srila Prabhupada talked about farm community development within Hare Krishna movement, within ISKCON, he said the very first problem that you have to solve is the food. Because if you're food independent, no matter what else happens, economically, politically, you're peaceful. Because you've got your food supply. And yes?
So the Prabhupada said you are self-sustained, you don't have to depend on any government or different those things, political symbols. So you are self-sustained. You don't have to obey means and you say always under pressure.
Yes, you
Yeah, is all GMO food bad? Because you read about food where it will be then resistant to pests. So it's genetically modified to be resistant to pests, but that way you don't have to put pesticide. So, but is a general statement all bad?
It's all bad. Here's why. Genetically modified food has been with us for 19 years now. 19 years ago, the British government commissioned the world's top geneticist. I'm sorry, I forget his name. He's from one of the Balkan countries, one of the Eastern Bloc countries. And they basically said to him, we want you to develop a genetically modified potato. Because potatoes are ubiquitous now. They're everywhere in the world. Everybody's eating potatoes. That's a whole interesting story about where they came from, how they got spread around the world. So he did. It took him a few years, but he created the first genetically modified potato. After creating that, he then tested a potato diet on successive generations of rats to see how it would affect them. And here's what he found. Their immune system, their reproductive system, and their endocrine system was severely compromised by eating this diet of genetically modified potato. He then went back to his employers, the British government, and he said, Hare Krishna, how are you? He said to them, I've done what you asked me to do. I've created this potato, but in all good consciousness, I don't think this is safe for human consumption. And they said, that's not why we hired you. You're fired. And don't you dare take your findings and your paperwork and share it with anybody else. They threatened him. actually. So they said, we will ruin you professionally. We'll make you the laughing stock of the scientific community. So he was a very honorable man. He took his findings, all this data, and this person is 19 years ago. The internet was a very different thing, but he blasted it out everywhere he could. It went viral for what could be considered viral 19 years ago, right? And that's why the European Union and Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, basically everybody but America does not allow genetically modified food in their system. You can have some, it's up to 3% of the ingredients of something can be genetically modified, but generally it's outlawed, cannot be done. And here's why. When you eat something genetically modified, what happens is that the lining of your intestinal tract is irritated by it. The food in an undigested form leaches into your bloodstream. And then your immune system does what it's supposed to do, which is react to that. So if it's like a foreign element undigested in your blood, you form an allergy to it. So now you're allergic to corn, you're allergic to wheat, you're allergic to soy products. That's what's going on. And many other things as well. I could go on and on about genetically modified, but no. You know, notice, here's the misconception people have about genetic modification. If you remember, I mean, in my public education, in the American public school system, in the 10th grade, we had that biology class, right? And in biology class, there was this one section about Gregor Mendel's pea experiment. Remember this? And you know, a simple thing. P-type A is crossed with P-type B. What do you get? P-type AB. And then they take another P-C and they get ABBC or something, you know, it's this boring thing that you have to sit through all that. Right? So people think, well, that's what genetic modification is, just a simple crossbreeding. They've gotten kind of fancy about it. No, that's not what it is. What they're doing is they're taking the gene, the DNA from a fish, and they're implanting it in the DNA structure of a tomato plant. Why would they do that? Well, the reason they do that is because fish live in a cold environment. They want to be able to grow tomatoes for profit in a colder environment, so the tomatoes are not subject to frost damage. So let's take the gene from a fish and put it into a tomato plant, so they're resistant to this. It's all driven by profit, so they're after. Krishna does not arrange it like that.
So why US has accepted this one? Then they really know, right? This is harmful for the whole country.
Yeah.
Why they have accepted? What
Well,
do
the
you
people have. If you take a poll of the American public, 90% of it will say we want all these foods labeled. In the state of Washington right now, you should vote on this. There's a 527 referendum. It's a public referendum on whether or not it's mandatory in the state of Washington to label genetically modified food. Monsanto and DuPont have poured $42 million into the state right now to convince people that this is not a good idea. It'll make the food prices go up. You know. It's $42 million. They defeated this in California. It's called Proposition 37 in California. They defeated it very slimly. And the public is saying it, screaming it. We want to know whether or not, we have a right to know whether or not something is genetically modified or not. We don't want to eat these things. And they're fighting it because what they're really worried about is litigation. That as the evidence begins coming forward that this is actually unhealthy for you, and they're poisoning, right, they're worried about massive class action litigation. Right. So that's what's going on. And yes?
One more, if we are saying we are buying organic food, does it mean that it's not genetically modified at all? Or doing
If it says
check?
USDA certified organic 100%, it's not genetically modified. But you have to understand something about organic. Something can be organic, but not nutrient dense.
But not?
Nutrient dense. Here's why. Legally speaking, for a food to be considered organic and pass the test, yes, it is organic, they can't use fungicide, pesticide, herbicide, and chemical fertilizer. And everything they put in that soil has to be approved, any amendment that they use by the Organic Material Research Institute, OMRI, they're called. So what these companies do is they just sneak in, yeah, we're not using any of that, but it doesn't mean, like an Indian farmer, that they're putting gober and they understand the relationship between the microbiotic activity of the soil, the health of the soil, and the health of the plants, and therefore the health of their children and the health of the community. They could care less. They just see the market potential. They want to saturate the market with organic zucchini or something. So they just barely get under the wire by not using those chemicals, but it doesn't mean those vegetables have nutrition. Because the conscious effort to pay the debt back to Bhumidev for one of our 7 mothers is not there. Not only that, but I've actually done this at Whole Foods. If you go into Whole Foods and sometimes in Whole Foods they have gobi, cabbage, and they list the name of the farmer. And you can contact them, even a phone number sometimes. How do you reach? So I did this once in upstate New York, north of New York City. And I saw the name of the farmer, and I thought, well, let me go see this guy. I'm in the area. I'm just curious to see how he has this contract with Whole Foods. What's that about? So I visit his farm. He is organic. But I noticed that on his farming operation, he has no gober. He has no cows. He has no animal manure. I'm wondering, how is he getting away with this? Is he just mining his soil year after year? How does he recycle nutrients? Right? So I asked him, I said, I live in West Virginia, I have cows, and we use the cow manure. It's hard work, load the wagon, spread it, till it in. How are you doing this? How are you keeping your nutrient levels up? And he assured me, he said, it's not a problem because we have an organic, OMRI approved fertilizer. It's in a powdered form in bags, 50-pound bags. Oh, really? Could I see it? He was curious. So I go into his go down, his barn. And sure enough, he's got pallets of this stuff. And here's the ingredients. Blood meal, bone meal. It's cows. It's basically ground up cows in a powdered form. It doesn't mean that everybody selling the vegetables to Whole Foods or wherever you shop, is doing that, but it is a very common practice to use that, and it's so much easier for the farmer.
Most of the organic so-called fertilizers are like our blood meal.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are we eating? I mean, is it organic? Legally, yeah. Is it vegetarian? I got to think about that. Is it really vegetarian when that plant is sucking up the blood of a cow and then forming a brinjal? Oh, it's a good question. Yes.
Even genetically modified food, if a fish genes is injected into strawberry or something, we don't know. We think we are vegetarian, but we don't know. It's kind of very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, let's go back to our discussion about what we're offering the deity. The degree to which we can purify that offering so that the source, the point of origin where that food is coming from, is a reflection of our own effort to not give Krishna things that we won't give our own children, is the degree to which we'll develop our own farming operation here in Seattle.
Do we have such farms? Do we have a farm here in Seattle?
Hari Vilasno and Madhavachandra have a combined 18-acre nice piece of land, 20 minutes from here. So that has huge potential. So that we should support that operation. In other words, what's needed there to develop that so that what the deities are offering and what the congregation is offered is a reflection of our concern about these pressing issues. That's food independence. Right? Somebody else is still feeding you, but at least you have at least they chant Hare Krishna. and you can talk with them. You trust and love them, hopefully. That's very different. You have no idea where this food's coming.
Most of the common people, the way your industry works, like you just go and buy from say KFC,
Yeah.
the common people, they do work.
Yeah, it's all about convenience. But is it, either you're going to pay now by supporting this kind of endeavor, or you're going to pay later when you're undergoing chemotherapy and radiation treatment. the cruel fact is that most Americans, anyway, who have some savings, from years and years of hard work, end up spending it to save themselves from chemotherapy. So, if I, maybe not because of your diet, but the average American, if I pluck a hair and I analyze isolate the carbon isotope, when they dig up a mummy, they can actually figure out what their diet was, because these carbon isotopes have chains of molecules of carbon that are reflective of a different type of food. So if they were predominantly rice eaters, it'll show up in that isotope, carbon isotope, right? They know, they can figure out what the diet was. So if you do that in America right now, to any American, pluck a hair, and you look, it's corn. Because corn is in everything, and it's not just corn, it's genetically modified, right? So basically what you have going on here, considering the heart attacks, the cancer, the autism, here's a good example. 30 years ago, 1 out of 10,000 births was autistic. Now it's 1 out of 100, in only 30 years. 1 out of 100 births is autistic. So, how do we turn this around? It's not going to be done by the government. The government gives some grant money out to study this. But basically, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the FDA, EPA is heavily controlled by the moneyed interests of Monsanto, DuPont. It's just a revolving door. The people who are supposed to be regulating and protecting us, like Kshatriyas should, are actually just revolving from position in government to position in corporate, position in government, back and forth. Like and just in terms of sugar consumption, that's why I brought this. This is, according to medical science, how much sugar your body can take every day without damage. That's 4 teaspoons. In other words, I even question that. But anyway, that's what they say. 4 teaspoons right there. This is the amount of sugar that the average American actually does take every day. 27 teaspoons. 27. When you do that for a week, like most people do, that's how much you're putting in your body every week. Now multiply that times 52, and you'll understand why people are diabetic and obese. And it's not just sugar, it's genetically modified sugars. Because it's now grown from sugar beets, which are genetically modified, approved by the FDA.
Sugar beets?
Sugar beet, Michigan mostly.
But they are getting modified.
Yeah, they don't use sugar cane. They use sugar beet.
Beetroot.
It's kind of a beet.
It's a type of beet, it's very big like this. It's a beet family, but it's
It's
high
like a root.
end.
It's root type.
How do
It's
they
not
get
from
the
sugarcane?
How do they get the sweetness into that beach?
It's naturally sweet.
It's naturally sweet.
Yeah, they're sweet like anything.
Otherwise, it's not.
They cook it, they mash,
Have
they
you heard of
extract that.
coconut
It's just the
sugar?
way they do. They dry it.
Coconut sugar. Have you heard of coconut sugar?
Sure. Yeah.
So that also, I mean, it's compared to the regular sugar, it's much better because it has amino acids and all.
Minerals, yeah. There's other
It's made from the sugar, coconut, the flour of the coconut,
Right. Oh.
the nectar.
Right, so, anyway, these are all big challenges, and it's hard to change conditioning. We're conditioned to eat a certain way, we're purchasing a certain way, we're eating a certain way. So here comes this person making trouble now from New Vrindavan telling us that we should change. That's not my point. My point is to try to share with you what's the Krishna conscious way of looking at this, and how do we turn it around so we fulfill the second half of Prabhupada's mission. I mean, just think, what happens if this whole high-tech environment that you guys either work for or are surrounded by collapses? What are you going to do? You're going to go to Prabhu here because he's a farmer. And the Madhavachandra was raised in a village. And you're going to say, what do we do? How do we grow food?
You know that 6 days light was out, blackout.
Yeah.
So people were like getting crazy. They don't know how to balance their life, how to act against these challenges. Like everything will depend on like the home, outside, in safety of people who are just throwing the things, because even the safety of own stuff, they cannot, because it's smelling. So either they will be dumping or throwing out, or people just taking somewhere up and no paying.
Right.
Yes.
You know, what we think we've walked away from in the past, village India, you know, Gomber and bullocks and all this hard work and those struggles there, is actually a symptom, that civilization is actually a symptom of a very advanced civilization. Maybe not technologically, but for a reason. The reason is that more time was spent on spiritual cultivation than on making money. Just trying to materially improve your condition. And we're seeing that. You know, we're seeing, I mean, and I'm sure all of you have had this experience. We talked about this last night. When you go, I haven't been in India in 20 years, but I keep hearing, it's like, oh my God, you know, it's completely changed. What's changed? The value systems have changed. It's not just that now you can ride AC more often. There's no more third class unreserved. I always tell Americans that don't ever say you've seen everything until you've ridden third class unreserved on an Indian train in the 1980s. It's not that. That's not the hallmark of advanced civilization. The hallmark is integrity and character. That's the actual hallmark. So if you have a economy based upon plain living, high thinking, so that you save time for developing your Christian consciousness, that's advanced civilization. And that's a deliberate decision. That's not backwards. That's not Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal. That's actually deliberately done that way so that we prepare people for the next life. In other words, sustainability has to also include reincarnation. Is there anything more unsustainable than losing the human form of life? Can you imagine? You come to this point, the zenith of development of all the 8,400,000 types of life forms, and you throw it away for Kentucky Fried Chicken? It's insane. But that's what's happening. 90%, I know in New Vrindavan, I've asked our Indian devotees in New Vrindavan where they develop our congregation. There's 5 or 6 of them. It's a nice team. And I've asked them, I said, how many, you know, we get 30,000, 40,000 people visiting, predominantly 80% of them are Indian descent. How many of these people do you think are eating meat now? And what I expected them to tell me, 10%. They said 90%. I was in shock. Are you serious? 90%. So what a service to Srila Prabhupada if we could restore the ahimsa principle within our own congregation and outside of our congregation. What a wonderful thing. If we could go to the other, you know, Hindu temples throughout Washington, California, wherever they are, big, big congregations, right? And inspire them, not browbeat them, not just make them feel horrible about how they've compromised the ahimsa principle, but inspire them to follow why it's so important to follow this principle. Why, how it, what the consequences are of not doing it for personal health, for the environment, so many things. What a great service to Prabhupada. He would be so pleased. And how do you do that? You do it by forming support groups. We have to identify ahimsa support groups. We have to identify what are the causes, what are the triggers that cause somebody to begin compromising their culture and succumbing to meat eating. What is that? Well, we know. You know, it's peer pressure. Your colleagues are inviting you somewhere, it has eggs in it. So are you going to make a big scene about it? I can't eat that. Well, you have to. I mean, you can't make a big scene about it, but you have to become expert in explaining and preserving the real Vedic culture. And then Krishna will be so pleased with you for doing it. He'll empower you. And that's actually, when you've taken a birth in Bharatvarsha, you have that duty actually. Right? Bhumiti, Bharata Bhumiti Hoila, Manusha Janma Yara. What's the other? Right. For those who've taken birth in Bharatvarsha, they have this duty to spread Dharma How are you going to spread Dharma when you're walking in and out of Kentucky Fried Chicken? It's so contaminated. Anyway, I don't want to take all your day, and I have to go to the airport. I have to go back to Denver for a couple days and then back to New Vrindavan. So if you ever come to New Vrindavan, please, I would be honored and blessed to see you in the gardens that I take care of there. Please come and visit. I'm going to do a tour, and equally important, help develop our own teaching gardens, and also gardens that actually supply our congregation with our own food, and even beyond the congregation. It's a great opportunity. Western people are not going to come see Balaji. Rare person. They have to be pretty spiritually involved to understand that's God. Or come into our temple and understand the value of deity worship. Mostly they've been poisoned, contaminated by these pseudo-Christian, Judeo-Christian teachings that that's idol worship. They don't understand. Very difficult for them to make that leap of faith. What they can understand, though, is that we're interested in, and we have a way of understanding and defining what is sustainability by adding a karmic component to it. That there's karma for these things. And how do we explain it to people? How do we define? How do we recapture the real meaning of sustainability to include karma? Because they all kind of believe in karma. They don't really know what it is. It's like believing in gravity, but you don't know how to talk about it. They all kind of know it exists, but we can tell what is instant karma, what is delayed karma, what is collective karma. All these things, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, we have all of these tools, all these arrows in our quiver to defeat this, what's going on. So we have a responsibility to do that, actually. That was Prabhupada's energy. That was his movement. Not just to, come to the temple, take some prasad. That's also important. But we're meant to be people who spread Dharma as well. Any questions? Yes?
So in New Vrindavan, the Govinda restaurant and all, everything is grown there itself?
No. It's hard, the weather patterns in that part of the country are severe. You have a very gentle situation there. Western India is like, it's up 1,200 feet. Severe winters usually, very short growing season. There's, for every square mile where I do my farming, a square mile is 4 blocks square, the city, 4 city blocks square. There's 100 deer. 100 deer in 4 square blocks. That's the average, sometimes it's more. So my ability to grow it and their need to consume it at a certain time of year for a certain festival, it doesn't match very well. Unless they agree to only eat what's in season. So now you've got 500 guests coming for Gaur Purnima. And what am I giving them? Turnips and beets? That's the Sunday feast. Because that's what I can store. Maybe some gobi, a few potatoes. So if we truly ate only what we grow what you eat what you grow, it's very difficult to match that, given the fact that New Zealand is also a pilgrimage place. So you have so many people coming, you've got to feed them, and you have to want to cater a little bit to what they like to eat, not just what you happen to have in the root cellar. That's a little difficult like that. But the same struggle is there. They're still offering the deities things they should not technically be offering according to Shastra. Things that are tamasic and sitting in cans. Not so nice. Yes,
Prabhuji, which all vegetables are growing there? And due to the extreme weather, how you're coping up during the winter season? Are you not growing at that time, or?
No, you can't grow in the winter. But the nature of an organic farming operation is there's a lot of handwork. It's labor intensive. Normally, I have 10 or 12 apprentices coming in May through May, September. I'll always have some help there. What happens in September, excuse me, very often they're college, going to college. So I make a big planting plan. Oh, I've got all this help, so I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and the other. And September comes, and they'll go away. And I'm out in that field going, oh my God, it's just me. maybe I have one other person. So that's a challenge. What we have to do is make economic sense out of it, so there's some income for people who could actually raise a family by farming. There's a rural lifestyle that's Krishna conscious and economically viable. Because real sustainability, again, means it has to be socially, environmentally, economically, and spiritually sustainable. So,
Then what you're doing probably in the winter time?
well, in
Storing something for winter?
a little bit, but mostly I network with people in winter, a little travel. I'm ready to go again in March. So winter for me is just January, February. There's a little 60-day gap there. And I read, I do things that I can't normally do in the summer because I'm on a roller coaster from March until December. I actually do farming. Farming, Prabhupada said, is the most noble occupation. Why? Because you can't cheat. Either you do the work or you don't. You can't fake it. There's
not like
there's no
writing code.
virtual eggplants. It's either you grew it or you didn't. Either there in a box, here, cut it up and offer it. Or, you can't make it look like you did it.
It's not like you file a bug, okay, I fixed it. You don't have to fix it.
Right. 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 And all the manual skills are like that. There's actually a certain kind of intelligence that goes along with that that makes you very honest. Somebody brings a problem to you, your bicycle is broken. You either fix it or you don't. You can't give it back as that kind of fixed. My opinion is fixed. It's either fixed or it's not. And that there's a very different world than the world of ideas and sharing files and all this information going on all over the place. So that's the challenge. Is how do you make that economy of rural Krishna conscious living such that you can raise a family? And that's hard because the market prices are so manipulated on the outside. You can't control those. So if you pauperize the farming and you pauperize the farmer, how are you going to attract young people? They come and they see me, and I'm driving an old beat-up truck. My clothes I look like I was dragged behind a tractor for 10 miles. You're working with manure and soil all day, which I do. That's what I look like. And then I there's this young couple, idealizing what farming is about. They're looking at me going, this is what I'm going to end up with.
Okay, I'm changing my course.
Right. So what makes a farmer dangerous to the demons, the manipulators, the phony politicians, is that a farmer can take 50 cents worth of seed and create $500 worth of capital. And then he can decide how to use that capital. If somebody pays him for his produce, it's unrecorded. And then I can take that, I can trade, I can do this, I can buy something. They don't like that. In the Prabhupada wrote commentaries for one book called Light of the Bhagavat. Have you seen? Wonderful book. It's these Japanese pictographs of nature. And there's Srila Prabhupada, I think there's 17 commentaries. And in one of them, it's where he makes his statements about the gifted profession, farming. The pictograph is of this hoarding, heavy-set hoarding man. And he's got his servant leaning over like they're worried. And out the window behind them, everything is just blooming. Beautiful fruits are hanging from the trees, like you hear about Vrindavan, when Krishna was in Vrindavan, right? And they're worried because they can only manipulate when there's fear. And when there's plentiful of everything, why do you have to fear anything? The only thing we should fear is our lack of Krishna consciousness. As Prahlad Maharaj said, there's no impediment to devotional service. It's just that we're still locked into the fear mentality. There's not a scarcity of fear. That's how they manipulate. Anybody else have any questions?
So if somebody would have asked this question, for Mangalarati, we actually make sweets and we use a lot of sugar. So what is your opinion on the jaggery? Instead of using the sugar, can we use the jaggery? Good itself.
Yeah, I don't see why you can't. Yeah, there's two things there. One is, this is a really good question because what we did talk about, that we should talk about, is the Yukta Vairagya principle. It's a two-edged sword. Does everybody know this idea of Yukta Vairagya? The concept means that everything potentially can be used in Krishna service. And Prabhupada would use the example of the dictaphone. That, you know, when we read these purports, Srimad Bhagavatam, how did they get done? Prabhupada he had in front of him all the commentaries of the previous acharyas, and then he would summarize those and then add a little special emphasis on it according to the Western audience that he had come to preach to, the Western. That's what we're getting. We're getting the benefit of all of their realization funneled through Srila Prabhupada into that purport. So he would use the dictaphone as an example of how you can use technology in Krishna service. Or he'd also use the example of an airplane. And we're using this big, complicated technology. What goes into an airplane? Oh my God. But I'm using it because I'm traveling in Krishna service. Well, as it applies to temple activity, like the offering of the deities, and the point of origin and food net. In the old days, yeah, you kind of understand it. We were all 20 years old. We were coming, you know, none of us had any resources at all. There were no grihastas. Everybody was a brahmachari, right? So what did we do? We went to the store, bought some milk, and even if it had vitamin D in it or E or whatever the fish oil comes from, you know, we offered it. It's purified because our motive, our intention is right. As the movement progressed and as more people began sharing resources and as the facilities grew, you have to begin questioning, where's the dividing line here? Where do you draw the line between Yukta Vairagya and just pure conditioning? It's a tricky thing. So generally, the principle is that we want to offer Krishna things that we know the point of origin, and we know that the people who handled it all the way along the line are well-intended and ideally Krishna conscious. At the same time, we don't want to interfere with the diet of the deities. It's a good discussion. I don't know. I mean, I would lean on the side of usage to the jaggery because I'm a farmer, and I would think that's the safer thing to do. But just to give you an example, there's a devotee, Srila Prabhupada's disciple, named Nanda Kumar. He was Prabhupada's personal secretary for many years. His personal servant for many years, and his cook. And Nanda was an amazing devotee. He told me this personally, and it's documented in the memories tapes. Siddhanta Das has done these memory tapes. There's devotees speaking about their memories of Prabhupada, and it's also written. The same thing you see on those tapes is also in book format, right? So there was a period of time where Prabhupada's health was not good. An Ayurvedic physician visited Prabhupada, and he recommended to Prabhupada that for the time being, just eat a little lighter. Don't take your usual fare. And that was his advice. So then he left, and Nanda Kumar, Prabhupada's cook, said, Prabhupada, you know, I could make for you something lighter. I could make a salad for you each day at lunch instead of your usual rice dal chapati like that. And Prabhupada said, okay, let's try that. So Nanda did that. He gave him his usual breakfast, which was like yogurt and some fruit light. And then at lunch, he just made a big salad for him. And at the end of eating, Nanda asked him, so, what did you think? And Prabhupada said, oh, it was wonderful. And Prabhupada said, everybody should eat like this. It's actually very, very good, very healthy. So Nanda was, wow, this is great. You know? The next day, lunch came, time to cook lunch. He went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, would you like me to, again, make this salad? Prabhupada said, no, I grew up on rice dal and chapati.
I grew up on rice.
Now, understand, Prabhupada's a pure devotee, okay? So we're not talking about, he's not concerned with, you know, some problem maybe there, but Prabhupada's consciousness is purely on how to serve Krishna. So we can't think of it like that. So Nanda saw his opportunity to bring up his own issues, his own challenges with health. And he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I have to admit that I was raised in Southern California, he told him. And in that environment, I grew up on fresh fruits and vegetables. And I have to admit, when I eat that way, I'm much healthier. I have more energy. I don't sleep as much. I'm clear-headed, do more service. However, I'm willing to accept whatever you tell me. What should I do? I mean, should I just take what's offered to the deities and not worry about these kind of things? Or can I eat that way? So Prabhupada said, well, actually, it is better to eat only what's offered to the deities. But that's for Rupa Goswami. You are not Rupa Goswami. You are a neophyte. And a neophyte must do what's practical. So when I heard that, I was thinking back of my almost 40 years of living in temples and living mostly in the ashrams. I was thinking back all the temple presidents I had, who I made that argument to, who said, no, you have to only eat. You just need these, and how I was, very often I was not in optimum health. And I was envisioning myself strangling them as I thought about how I had tried to convince them that this is actually better for the devotees, better for everybody's health. Likewise. So you have these two things at play here. One is the diet of the deities. That should not be tampered with. They should get the best of everything. And then you have what's actually maximizing, optimizing the service of the devotees. So the diet, what's served, that should be built around those two principles. In the case of the sugar, I would opt for the jaggery because I think you know more about the source of it. I mean, in village India, if there's brahmanas in the village and there's a deity in the village, they're not, and the income is what the economy of the village is such that they can only offer jaggery. I don't think Krishna is, this isn't I think Krishna will accept it because the principle of accepting is if it's offered with love and devotion, not exactly what it is.
Even jaggery, because I have experience with jaggery. So when we used to make jaggery in our farm from sugarcane, the jaggery we keep it for family. It is different from what we sell it. Because it has some chemicals. They add some chemicals.
Oh, so what we get outside.
Yeah, not.
No, I'm not saying that all of them. It may not be dangerous chemicals. They do add something to make it look good. Color and all of them.
Yeah, I heard that
It is
like more whitish, but the brownish or chocolate color is the one which is brown.
They will put
But also, I don't know, they
They
will add
put
some
no brown color in
also
that.
they will add it. So I'm not.
No, why do they make it white first and then add brown again?
No. That's how the brown sugar you get in this country is not brown sugar. They make the white sugar and add brown color to it.
They add molasses
Molasses
back
back
on.
on.
It's white sugar. with
Because they
molasses.
have the whole factory already produced to
Yeah.
produce white sugar.
Uh-huh.
So it goes through the process because there is a demand for brown sugar. They make artificially make it brown.
This thing didn't really
Yeah, this is-
understand.
this is
Why do they
very-
make white and then why do they make brown again?
Mass production.
No, because
It's
it's
a-
It's
simple.
different,
Prabhu.
because it's
Working
for different
software,
cooking, different baking.
Same like office for.
Some, no, there's different cooking techniques that would be enhanced by using brown sugar, not white sugar. That's why. Plus, some people are just fooled. They just say, oh, brown sugar. It's like brown bread and white bread. Very often the brown bread, that's soft brown bread, it's just white bread with some color, food color.
But anyway, I'm not saying that you should know only jaggery is better than probably sugar, but jaggery is also you should be understanding that there are so many different grades of jaggery. This is, I am talking about 25 years before experience. This is 25 years back when we are making sugar. Because the sugar batch we keep it for our home is different.
So I'm still with this question mark. Like, okay, we cannot go back to the source of everything and get the real pure one to offer Krishna. So is it okay to compromise on whatever the best we get? But
Yeah.
yet we don't know the source, whether it's pure or not, but still we can.
But the effort to try to find the source, or better than that, to grow the source itself is
Yeah.
ideal. Like, for example, my world is I deal with environmental people and sustainable ag, Americans who are in that world of local foods and CSA, community supported agriculture and all that. And what you find out is that when you make the effort to go out of the usual purchasing and consumption pattern of the temple and find those, that you find all these amazing people out there who are sympathetic to Krishna consciousness. It's wonderful. You find that they actually, because why? Because they're drifting ever so slowly to the mode of goodness. And you may just be the spark they needed to light up their spiritual fire, because now they're a supplier of the temple, and they've come into association with devotees, and they see the deity, and they take prasad. So it's a nice, actually it's a very nice service to purify the diet of the temple and what's being offered to deities by making those connections outside the usual realm of purchasing. Usually the usual realm of purchasing means one person has the assignment to call up and they deliver a truck full of vegetables from California. So yes, it's more work. You have to go out and, you have to look through the farm guide of King County or surrounding counties and actually go out and find these people. God, you find out there's all kinds of favorable people out there. It's a good thing. Otherwise, is this just going to be a temple full of people only with Indian ethnicity? Only? No, it shouldn't be. It should be for everybody. Krishna consciousness is not, Krishna is not Indian. Krishna's Krishna. Well, how are you going to do that? What's the way you're going to get them to come? Well, we've got our festivals. Hari Vilas is expert in putting these festivals on. But the thread, the real common thread here that really is something that enlivens Western people is environmental issues, local foods, all these things. So where do we enter? Well, where we enter into that is that we have the oldest farming system in the world. Vedic farming, the philosophy of using honoring Bhumi Dev, making an offering, all that is way beyond vegetarian, way beyond vegan. But if our ingredients aren't pure, they'll never listen to us. They'll never be open. Their heart will not open to hearing any philosophy at all. But they see that our source, our point of origin of what we're offering the deity, what we're serving to the public, is from contaminated sources. They will not take it seriously. So we're hurting our preaching by not making that research. So what to do? All right, if the congregation has sufficient funds, hire somebody to go out and do that research. Get on the computer, look at those addresses, get in a car, put in the gas money, go visit those places and find out what they have to offer. What are our options here? You can't make a decision researching like that, and then you're making an informed decision. So that's a service to the deities, that we're going to try to give Krishna sweet potatoes that are from Cascade Farms or whatever. In King County alone, there's 26 organic farming operations. That's more organic farmer operations than the whole state of West Virginia, just in this one county. So you're in this like heavenly planet where everybody's conscious of these things. Compared to where I live, the whole population is obese and diabetic. They're eating this horrible diet. So you're in this like heavenly place. But you have a responsibility now to purify, to further purify the people who are supplying it. They're getting purified. The deity is pleased because it's from a pure source. And you're being purified by interacting like that. So you're drawing Western people here too. They want to come to our temple. You go visit them on our farm, then you give them something to invite them to our farm or our temple this festival.
So what should we should, because as we are from different background, not from the farming background. So there are so much tricks are there, as you said in your lecture, today Shani, yesterday, they have some tricks like if we ask them, it's organic, but they mix something else in that as a fertilizer. So what should we ask to the farmers? Suppose I volunteer and go there and want to try to find out.
Right.
So how to talk to them and how to find out and how to get the right things from them.
Okay, so you want to ask them, you want to just be straightforward and say, in our tradition, we're looking for a source of pure food. But purity for us means that no animal products, from the slaughter industry were used in the production of this food. For example, bone meal, ground up cow bones, blood meal, fish emulsion. None of these things were used. So we're trying to find that. That you can do just on the phone pretty much. I'll tell you. Because, sometimes you're just worried about litigation. Very often I've called around to kind of figure this stuff out, and I don't tell them I'm a Hare Krishna or that I'm of a Hindu tradition or something. I just say, I have an extreme allergy to anything that's a byproduct of animals.
I think that's
That's
a
the
good
best
idea.
Right, and I'm just wondering, is there anything in the ingredient list of your product that's from animals? Anything? And they're petrified they're gonna get sued if they lie to you.
That's
I
bad.
say that all the time.
Yeah.
When I'm going to get ice cream or something, I tell them I'm allergic to eggs. Can you please check?
Yeah.
There's something like that. Anywhere I go, and they really help out.
Yeah, they're very helpful.
They really help.
You call the 800 number to all these places.
And to add to the point what Prabhu asked, it's like this is like a principle, and sometimes things are not available, and we are going to offer whatever the deity's diet is. Because things are not available, whatever available, we are going to offer it. But that doesn't mean that we forget it. Okay, it's not available, I'm going to just keep offering whatever I have. You got to be conscious. This is what I'm offering because I don't have it. What can I do to improve? If you don't become conscious of what we are offering, how can you become Krishna conscious?
How can we think that Krishna, we say Krishna is all-knowing, all-seeing, he's everywhere, he's omnipresent, he's omniscient. Do we think that he doesn't know every step of the way in which those potatoes were produced? And that the people who are picking that broccoli are dying of cancer? Why do we want to be associated with that? We should not. We should back away from that like anything. We don't want to be part of this. We want to find pure sources. We offer something that's not an offense to Bhumi Dev, and it's not, the general public perceives us as being caring about the environment. Right now they don't. They pretty much think the Hare Krishna movement is arrogant about these things. They think they're so transcendental or beyond all these considerations. Or they think that we're an interesting group of people, but we're relevant to their lives because we're not interested in organic or all these things. We just buy any old thing and offer it. So those are both things that can be adjusted nicely.
Being conscious of what is happening in around us, what we are doing, consciousness needs to develop. Right? We may not have all the facilities. We can't just like stop everything and go and live in the farm. First we think about it. Right? What is happening? What are the sources? First, at least to know what it is. That's the first step. Then we can, as Prabhu said, we can find out alternate solutions. We can start researching. First, we shouldn't even know. We're not even knowing what is happening. We're just like sheep. We're going and working, getting money, buying whatever we can, and offering. We're not even conscious. A little bit because we know these two words: organic, non-GMO. Something we have registered like a robot. No, anything organic is good. No GMO is good. Like that. Something is there. It needs to develop further. As I said, just because something is being organic, something is being non-GMO, doesn't mean that it's healthy. Right? So it looks like the karmic comes from this blood meal and bone meal. It's probably better to eat GMO type. Probably it looks like. Right? So we need to be conscious. The first step is to be conscious of what is happening, what we are doing. Not that consciousness doesn't develop, then we can't change. First step is to know. There is a vision behind why we
Got the farm.
It's not that accidentally he got. So Haridas Prabhu mentioned like 3 years back, like he has 3 things in his mind. After this temple was built, he has 3 things in his mind. Number 1, develop a school for our children. Number 2, get a farm. Number 3, expand our preaching. Open a center in Bellevue, which is center of all the suburbs. The location is so accessible to so many people. This is what he had. He mentioned this. And that's why Krishna arranged. It's not coincidental or accidental. Right? How we got this Bellevue property, it's unbelievable. Somebody can't imagine that we can do what we are doing. Somebody cannot believe what land Haridas Prabhu got. And out of nowhere, the second land was coming and temple was supposed to buy. Unfortunately, temple couldn't afford because we got into Pallavi project. And he called me like, I was not planning to farming, even though I forgot all the farming 20 years back. So Prabhu said, Mahavichandra, can you buy it? And I didn't even think about it. I said, okay, I will tell you tomorrow about this, I just want to talk to my wife. And he said, why are you asking me? Prabhu is telling you, definitely there has to be some vision behind it. Just buy it. Next day I came and told Prabhu, I'll buy it. So because he has a vision, and it's, yes, we are in the very, very beginning stage. It will take time, but it has to start somewhere. This building started somewhere. Nobody at the time, 20 years back when Haridas Prabhu came here, nobody thought that there will be a beautiful temple here. So Prabhu had a vision. He told actually. One day I'm envisioning, they used to live in a trailer here, right? They used to live in a trailer in the same property. He said, one day there will be a beautiful temple here.
No, in few months or few weeks, he's
Anyway, so that's, so we are listening to this Prabhu's presentations and realizations and his knowledge and wisdom, at least so that it first starts with Sabda, right? We hear conscious. Actually, when I went to Vrindavan in May for the Festival of Inspiration, I didn't know that Prabhu was presenting. I didn't know anything about farming presentation at the time. Just like 1 or 2 weeks or one month before, Haridas Prabhu told me to buy this farm. And I just went and I didn't know that it's about farming. It's just like some presentation I went and attended. Prabhu presented. I was like blown away. I was thinking, see, Krishna is perfect. Krishna wants me to really get inspired. That's why he is giving all this information. See, it's not coincidence that I bought a farm and I went to New Vrindavan and sat in the presentation of how to build green congregation. Right? It was not coincidental. See, and Krishna is guiding us. Krishna is telling, like, we have to get better, we have to think about it, we have to become conscious. So, see, I can't do full-time farming yet, but some step is, they are offering some service, at least buying the land, like listening. And I invited Prabhu immediately from that time himself. Prabhu said, I can't come in summer. And I said, Prabhuji, whenever you can, please let me know. He said, because I have interns and apprentices, I cannot come in summer. After end of summer, maybe I have 1 week time. I might come. I don't know when it is. I'll let you know. And I was just where I told Prabhu, yes, it's wonderful. We made him come. So super excited. And just like 2 weeks back, Prabhu contacted me. He said, I can come this week. I can come on Monday. I can come on Saturday. So immediately I spoke to Haridas Prabhu and then we arranged this travel, and Prabhu kind enough to come here and share this. And Haridas was requesting him
What time you have
to
come?
see Haridas.
That's a good question. What time is it?
What time is
3:30. So we need to do so.
Like last year, 1.5 years back, I was having this desire to was coordinating morning Mangalarti sweets. So I was thinking, okay, the milk what milk is not right. So I was trying what can he. So we were trying to get the best milk, was try to order raw milk. We did it for about 6 months. At least couple
Raw
of
milk
days.
in somebody's
Raw
house,
milk.
yeah.
Yeah. They actually delivered to my home.
Oh, yeah.
Initially they said unless you have 10 gallons minimum, I won't deliver. But I convinced them to deliver like 5 or 6 gallons. They were delivering. We were using the raw milk, making sweets for couple of days. And this, after that they said, no, it's not.
You get from the
What? Huh?
There is one lady here who will come.
No,
and
Haridas
service.
Prabhu started actually.
Same source. They will, instead of delivering there, they used to deliver to my house direct. Now they said no, without 10 gallons minimum, we won't deliver.
But we go and pick it up from there, so.
I used to do that every year.
That is organic?
That is also the raw
Wrong.
What is the definition of raw milk?
Huh?
It is almost like organic. It is not certified organic because the hay they feed is probably there in both certification of USD organic. So it is all practical purposes. It is organic, but they are not just certified.
Just for going through officially.
No,
It
that's
costs
fine,
money
no,
also.
that's fine.
It's almost
But
organic.
that-
But it's not protected. It's not a ahimsa cow, but at least
I think so, at least, yeah.
It is
That-
like
that again
raw milk,
was the
it's
concern. Okay, we are getting raw milk, but again,
that's
that
that.
keeps
See, we improved from non-regular milk to organic to raw Now next
Now the
step
next
is,
step, want
is
to
to
go
get,
to
we
the
want to get
next
ahimsa milk for Krishna at least.
That itself at least.
At least for Krishna we need to get ahimsa milk, then probably to devotees, you
Which
know.
milk? Again.
Ahimsa
Ahimsa.
milk, protected cow.
Protected cows.
Oh, that is coming?
Ahimsa milk.
We
It's
get
like
that.
the
Coming, but
protected cows.
it's,
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought, no,
if we have our own cows, then
You get that.
If you have enough purchasing power, if you all consolidate, we can go and talk to a farm.
Yeah.
And farmer say, hey, we will pay
Thank you.
like $10 or $12 per gallon.
Hope to see
I'm
you
ready
again.
for that thing, yeah.
I know, Prabhuji, but you're ready, but it's not just one person ready.
No, I'm
It's
saying
not
at least
sufficient,
I'm
there has
saying-
to be some purchasing
Well,
power.
We can go talk, we can find and then talk and then.
That's one step, and another step is to like get our own cows. Those are the different steps we can do.
Haridas Prabhu had this temple and I think diorama also. Krishna's past on diorama have to create it and this new temple and then farming.
Anyway,
There is one more. I
so
saw,
thank you, Prabhuji, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming here.
my
and,
pleasure.
we want to
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hope I
For
said
inspiring
something.
us.
We're thankful and
Makes sense.
grateful to your sacrifice and come here.
Prabhu, thank you very much for coming here.
Because
Thank you.
by hearing only we can know what is good and bad and then we can understand from
Hopefully.
what we think good, or what we think good is how much good really. And then how much we can offer best, we can go further to improve serving to Krishna.
Thank you for coming and we are going to the airport. And we pray to Radha Nila Madhava and Gaurita and Janampada Shivdra and Sitaram, Lakshmana and Lakshmi Narasimha Gopalji and Giriraj and Prabhupada and other Vaishnavas that you come here more often.
Yes.
And we become part of our congregation to help us
Yeah.
to
Let's see.
develop Haridas Prabhu's vision.
Let's see what Krishna is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki.
Jai. This place Tapa Punja Prabhu ki.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
So Prabhu, you do, there's some talk like college seminars every
Yeah, I do a lot of workshops. and
workshop.
Yeah, workshops and talks at colleges.
So do you think you give everything on the radio?
Video?
No, radio.
Radio? No, not yet. Working on it.
Yeah, no, if you are interested in radio talk, we